She'd given up on life, until he showed up with legs made of miracles. The forest felt eternal. Outside, the pine trees bent under the weight of the snow, forming natural corridors of white silence. The wind whispered through the branches with a constant moan, like the world was remembering something that hurt. It was the kind of place where even time hesitated to move forward. The solitude wasn't by accident. It was a choice. The shelter he lived in used to be an old military observation post, now buried beneath forest and forgetfulness. The entrance was hidden under a rocky slope, camouflaged with moss and ice, invisible to satellites and humans alike. It was exactly what Rafa wanted. Once a leading biomechanical engineer for the U.S. Defense Force Prosthetics Division, Rafa was known in tech circles as the guy who said no to Mars. He had everything lined up to become the next big name in neurokinetic engineering, until the day he lost someone who mattered. After that, he traded the world for silence, fame for anonymity, and civilization for machines. There, surrounded by circuit boards and half-built exoskeletons, he found a kind of meaning. Not redemption, just routine. Enough to keep breathing, until she fell from the sky. It was the morning of 2086. The thermal radar pinged, a barely audible blip pulsing on his wrist. At first, Rafa assumed it was an animal. A bear, maybe, or some poor creature frozen midwinter. But something was off. The thermal signature was too steady, too human. Armed with just an old rifle and a thermal coat, he climbed the slope and walked through the pines. What he found didn't make sense. Lying in the snow, with no visible clothing except a torn metallic cloak, was something impossible. Emerald green skin, long hair and deep violet waves, her face partly frozen over. She wasn't shivering. She didn't breathe like a human, but the heat was still there. Soft, steady, like an ember buried under ash. She had no legs, or rather, what was left of them. Rafa dropped to his knees beside her, and his brain kicked in without permission. Her joints were destroyed. Flesh had been replaced with implants that clearly weren't human, more organic than mechanical. Like bones and circuitry had grown together from the start. He'd never seen anything like it, not even in top-secret prototypes, not in the Lunar Project archives. And yet, something about this broken being hit him like a punch to the chest. She was dying, but she was alive. Rafa hesitated. He had made a vow to himself never to help anyone again, to let the world move on without him. But here, lying on the ice, was an exception with green skin. Gently, he wrapped her body in a thermal blanket, activated the neural stabilizers in his suit, and carried her back to the shelter. For the next several hours, while snow kept falling outside, Rafa forgot the promises he had made to himself. He could only think one thing. She wasn't born to die, sitting still. And for the first time in years, he powered up the full lab. The first sound she made wasn't a breath. It was a snap, like something inside her was reconnecting. An electric pulse surging through a body that had been asleep for far too long. Rafa heard it from where he was, monitoring her vitals on a suspended screen. The flatline graph spiked. He left his mug of untouched tea and rushed to the isolation chamber. The door opened with a soft hum, revealing the figure on the biomedical table. The ceiling's white light reflected off her moss-green skin. Her purple hair, still wet and tangled, draped over her shoulders like a wild cloak. And her eyes, when they opened, looked like two galaxies crashing into each other. Iridescent, deep, fierce. She glanced around, instinctively distrustful. Tried to move, and then realized. Nothing below her waist responded. She tried to scream, but her voice came out distorted, vibrating like compressed metallic waves. A language Rafa didn't recognize. And yet, it seemed to hum straight into his bones. Hey, easy, he said, raising his hands. You're safe. Just stay still for now. She looked at him with an expression that not even paralysis could hide. Rage. Desperation. Wounded pride. The panel's sensors lit up. Her heart rate spiked. The energy pulses in her exposed implants, or what was left of them, were unstable. You fell from a ship, he told her, pointing at the monitor. Your systems were failing. I stabilized what I could. She didn't answer with words, but her glare said it loud and clear. Who gave you the right? For a moment, silence stretched between them. A chasm between species. between wounds that had no translation. Then she reached for the wires in her neck and screamed again, a series of high-pitched, broken frequencies that made the ceiling tremble. Rafa backed off, startled, but not out of fear for his safety. It was the scream of someone who had lost everything. Hours later, when she finally passed out from exhaustion, or from the mild sedative he'd quietly introduced into the system, Rafa sat watching her from the shadows, eyes fixed on the oxygen tube he'd improvised using parts from an old cargo ship. He muttered to himself, "I don't know who you are, but nobody survives orbital reentry with a shattered body and still fights to get off the bed, unless there's something burning inside them." Rafa had no kids, no friends nearby. He didn't even wear a badge anymore. But looking at her, a stranger, broken and battered, with the most alive eyes he'd ever seen, something stirred in his chest. He got up, typed a command in the neural prosthetics panel, and reopened the project he'd sworn he'd never touch again. Series 7 Legs, extraterrestrial interface. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was theirs now. Her name was Kalira, or, at least, that was the closest approximation Rafa could pronounce. The first time he tried, she corrected him with a low, resonant sound from the back of her throat, her eyes narrowing, not in anger, but in pride. In her language, it meant something like she who was meant to rise. A cruel irony, coming for someone with no legs. Over the next 3 days, Rafa pieced together a rudimentary vocabulary with the help of an old neural translator he'd built years ago. An experimental, glitchy thing, but one that could capture emotion as well as words. That's how he learned Kalira wasn't an explorer, not a peace envoy, not even a fugitive. She was a mistake. "I was canceled," she said, struggling through a raw mix of languages, wired into the translator. "Rejected by Origin Clan. Defective. Unacceptable. Because of your legs?" he asked. She paused, then nodded slowly. "They are born perfect," she explained, her voice flat, but her eyes glittering with something almost childlike. "Or they're shut down." Rafa felt a knot form in his gut. "So they threw you away?" "No, they gave me the chance to fall on my own." Silence. Outside, the wind howled like a starving beast. He kept watching her. The way she spoke, always in short, clipped sentences like emotional detachment was part of her culture. But the way her eyes followed him, that said something else. In the early hours of the 4th day, the shelter was hit by a medium-range electromagnetic pulse. The lights died. Systems went dark for 11 seconds. And when the power returned, the outer radar had logged an orbital reading. And then, nothing. Rafa froze. It wasn't a falling satellite. It wasn't space junk. It was a probe. Worse, he hadn't detected it until it was already gone. "They tracked her," he whispered. In the lab, Kalira stared at the wall, silent. "Who are they, Kalira?" "My origin people. My creators. My judges. Do they know you're alive?" She looked at him, drained and hollow. "They do now." Hours later, Rafa descended into the lower lab. Alone. His hands were slick with grease, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. He powered up the Series 7 components. Legs originally designed for synaptic integration with human organisms, now re-engineered, with a little help from alien reverse engineering, for something far more ambitious. But when he came back upstairs with the parts sealed in a containment case, Kalira was waiting for him, propped up on her arms. "They won't work," she said. "They'll track me through the neurodynamic field. The legs will make me traceable. Forever. You'd rather die?" "I'd rather disappear." He took a slow breath. "I didn't spend months out here in the middle of a frozen hell, building a lab the size of a closet, just to watch you drag yourself around like garbage. I can change that. You'll kill me." "No, I'll give you a choice. They took that from you. I want to give it back." She stared at him. Too long. And for the first time, she didn't look away. "You're dangerous," she whispered. "I'm just human." Exactly. Outside, the snow buried everything. Inside, the war between two worlds had shrunk to a quiet room, a legless alien, and a man beginning to feel something that hurt more than guilt. Hope. It all started with a sound that didn't belong to Earth. A rising hum, like 1,000 blades vibrating in sync, too high-pitched for any human engine, but deep enough to rattle the ground. Rafa jolted awake from the impact. Optical alarms flared red on the ceiling. Interstellar incursion codes. Coordinates cracking across the screen. Kalira was already awake. Her once cold eyes now wide with panic. They're here. How did they breach the planet so fast? They never left. They were waiting. Waiting for me to activate anything with a neural pulse. She looked at him like it was his fault. And in a way it was. The facility trembled again. Something had pierced the atmosphere. Rafa dashed to the security panel. Thermal sensors showed 3 non-human silhouettes approaching the west entrance. They're here. Weapons or diplomacy? With them, there is no diplomacy. Then weapons. He ran to a side wall and yanked open a hidden panel. Inside, a support exosuit. Old, worn, but functional. Activated with a heavy metallic click. He slipped into it without a word, the gears adjusting to his body with surgical precision. When he turned, Kalira was still watching him. "It won't work," she said. "The suit. You." Rafa exhaled, then faced her. "I'm not letting them take you. I don't even care why anymore." She opened her mouth to respond, but didn't. For a second, just one, fear gave way to something far more dangerous. Trust. The wall exploded at 3:58 a.m. The 3 intruders didn't carry conventional weapons. Their arms became blades, faces masked with pulsing light visors. They looked like her, but colder, more refined, more perfect. They didn't speak. They just pointed at her. Kalira lifted her broken body, bracing on her arms. She stared them down. Even without legs, she looked like a fallen queen. "Don't take me back," she said. "I chose to fall." The one in the center turned to Rafa and lunged. The first blow slammed Rafa to the floor. His exosuit screamed with overload. The second invader moved behind, aiming for the base's core systems. But Kalira screamed, a sound that split the soul. Then she did the unthinkable. She hurled herself forward like a missile, dragging her mutilated body across the floor and slamming into the attacker with a sharp crack against the wall. It was just enough. Rafa triggered the suit's magnetic pulse and launched the third invader into the ceiling with enough force to crack the concrete. The fight lasted 38 seconds. When it was over, all 3 were down, but so was Kalira. She lay on the ground, chest heaving, each breath a struggle. Rafa knelt beside her, reached out. "You trusted me." She coughed, dark blue blood on her lips, then smiled just barely. "For the first time," she said, voice weak. "The fall was worth it." And there, with the shelter and ruins, both of them broken, and the universe watching from just beyond the smoke, a silent decision passed between them. They would see it through, together, even if the end came tomorrow. If you've ever rooted for an impossible love, subscribe to the channel. There's plenty more stories like this one. Share it. Drop a comment telling us what you would have done in Rafa's place. And don't forget, sometimes, even something broken can be what saves the world. The smoke still danced in the air like silent ghosts. Rafa pressed a thermal band to his left shoulder, where part of his exosuit had cracked under the blow of an organic blade. The wound wasn't deep, but it bled more than it should have. The pain came in waves, rhythmic, almost methodical, like his body was trying to remind him he was still alive. Kalira lay on the metal floor, surrounded by shards of alien armor and burnt-out circuits. The crash, the fight, and the neural tracking trauma had left her unstable. Her eyes were closed, but her heartbeat remained. Weak but steady, Rafa had seen soldiers die with less. He dragged himself over to her. A section of the inner wall was still intact, offering partial shelter from the freezing wind, now seeping through holes in the roof. The heating system was shot, and the backup generators wouldn't last long. And still, every part of him said, "Stay. You should have run," he murmured, wiping dried blue blood from the side of her face. Kalira opened her eyes. Just barely, but it was enough. "So should you." "Yeah." He smiled, tired. "Doing what I should do isn't really my thing." She tried to smile back, but the pain was too much. With the life support systems failing, Rafa spent the next 4 hours tearing down what was left of the lab. He used parts from maintenance drones to build a portable stabilization pod, a thermal aluminum shell adapted to Kalira's biostructure. She hated it, of course. "I'm not an invalid." "No, you're alive, and I plan to keep it that way." She nodded, reluctantly. During the process, he had to get close to the cortical circuits at the base of her skull. He needed to reconnect certain conduits so the new prosthetics, still in beta testing, could even hope to interface. "Don't do this unless you're sure," she said. Her voice metallic but firm. "I'm never sure. But if you want to dance again, this is where we start." She blinked, slowly, and gave permission. As a new day rose over Alaska, painting the sky in shades of gray and lilac, Rafa's shelter became a memory. In his backpack, he carried what he could: parts, circuits, residual energy cells, and the new legs, still cold, still silent. In his arms, he carried Kalira. She didn't protest anymore. He crossed the woods with sharp eyes, a rifle slung over one shoulder, and pain deep in every part of him. Every step was a quiet promise. "If I have to carry you to the end of the world, then the end can wait." Hours later, he found what he'd been searching for: an old, abandoned mining station. Solid structure, protection from a cold, no signs of life, still running on a partial solar generator. It was there they'd do what no one expected: start over. On their first night at the new base, while Kalira slept, hooked up to the first test of the prosthetics, Rafa sat watching the electrical pulses running through her new green legs. It wasn't just technology. It wasn't just survival. It was the beginning of something that couldn't be stopped anymore. The first time she stood up, it wasn't graceful. The legs were still stiff. The artificial muscle connectors needed micro-adjustments by the millisecond, and the nerve endings weren't syncing with the smoothness of a natural body. She trembled. Her knees buckled, and she fell. Rafa rushed forward to catch her, but she pushed him away before he could touch her. "Again," she said through clenched teeth. "Kalira, again." He nodded and restarted the joint motors. The days that followed were full of repetition. Stand, fall, adjust, test, frustrate. Rafa stayed beside her in silence, always with a tool in hand and eyes alert. He never laughed when she stumbled, never said, "You've got this." He just was there, like an anchor, like someone who didn't see her as a miracle or a burden, but as something real. It infuriated her and drew her in. One night, after another round of testing, she sat on the cold floor of the station, sweaty, exhausted, her breathing unsteady. Rafa sat beside her. The solar generator's light cast soft amber shadows across the walls. She spoke without looking at him. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you want to walk." "It's not just that. Humans don't do things for nothing. You always want something." Silence. He thought for a second, then said, "I thought I'd never feel anything for anyone again. Then you fell out of the sky and made me feel angry, scared, protective." He gave a tired half smile. "And now I'm stuck. You're my favorite mistake." She laughed. For the first time, not a polite or guarded laugh. A real one. Rough. Accidental. "You're weird, human. And you're stubborn, alien." Later that night, while she slept, still connected to calibration sensors, Rafa watched her. The way the prosthetics now fit like they'd always belonged. The way her chest rose and fell with a new kind of calm. And the way she seemed present, even in sleep. He moved closer, brushed a few wires away from her face, let his fingers gently touch her cheek, and she didn't pull away. The next morning, she stood on her own, wobbly, unsteady, but on her feet. When she saw Rafa waiting at the door, she simply said, "Don't help me." He didn't. She took 2 steps, then 3, then fell. But she laughed. And this time, he laughed too. They spent the rest of the day laughing at falls, tuning motors, exchanging glances. And when the sun set over the ice, Kalira removed the neural connector from her neck and looked at him with those intense eyes. "You're not like them." "I hope not." "Who are they?" She hesitated. "The ones who never look at what's broken." "And what do you see when you look at me?" She didn't answer with words. She just stepped closer, slowly, silently. The prosthetics made a soft sound with each step. She stopped in front of him, touched his chest, lightly. "This still works." Rafa took her hand. "I think it started working again when you shoved me during that ridiculous fall." She smiled, a small smile, but enough to light the whole station. The sky was clear that night. No clouds, no sound, which is why, when the purple beam sliced through the sky in absolute silence, Rafa knew, even before the alarm, that something terrible was about to happen. Kalira knew it too. The glow in her eyes matched the one she'd seen the day she was discarded. The final collection ship. It's a verdict, she said. They only send that when the court has already decided. What do they decide? That I shouldn't exist anymore. The ship didn't land. It hovered. Silent. Massive. A dark colossus with spiraling, pulsing lights. Like an inverted heart. And beneath it, 3 beams began boring into the ground. A slow, unstoppable process. In minutes, they'd vaporize the station and everything around it. They don't want you back, Rafa said. They want to erase you. Collier nodded, and for the first time, she didn't look surprised. I'm an error, but you're a threat. To them. To me. Rafa activated the evacuation protocol. He packed what he could. Series 7 data, 2 microgenerators, and an external rebreather. He ran toward her, ready to carry her again. But Kalira was no longer there. He found her outside, standing. The legs were working. Not perfectly, but solid. She was staring at the ship like someone daring a god to come down. I'm not running anymore. They'll destroy you. Then let them try. The ground began to tremble. Shards of ice lifted into the air as the energy field grew stronger. Then, from the underbelly of the ship, a humanoid figure descended, but larger than any living being. A living sentinel, built of spiraling plates and violet light. A genetic annihilator. Rafa cocked the plasma rifle, but Kalira stopped him with a gesture. This isn't your war. It is now. She gave a small smile, then charged. The battle was a poem of destruction. Kalira ran across the ice, metal feet sparking with every burst. The annihilator fired vibrational blasts that cracked the ground in waves. But she dodged. She moved with instinct, with pain. And Rafa didn't stay behind. He triggered a pulse microgenerator, destabilizing the enemy's shield. And when Kalira leapt, spinning midair, channeling all the power in her prosthetics into one brutal kick to the creature's core, the impact was so strong it fractured the ship's hull above them. But she fell too. Her sensors overloaded. The prosthetics melted at the joints. She hit the ice hard, groaning in pain. The annihilator staggered, but rose again. Rafa ran to her, panicked. The annihilator approached, slower now, but still deadly. Rafa, she whispered, leave me. Say what you built. That's more important. Shut up, he said, kneeling, tears freezing to his face. You're the only thing that matters to me now. Then he did the only thing he could. He took off the external respirator, placed it over her mouth, and stood between Kalira and the annihilator, weapon in hand. No armor. No chance. Foolish human, she tried to scream, but it was too late. The annihilator fired. The blast threw Rafa yards away, but the generator he'd activated seconds before detonated as well, vaporizing the creature in a wave of white light that tore across the sky like lightning. And in the silence that followed, there was only snow and blood. Kalira dragged herself to him. Her sensors still flickered weakly. The respirator hummed, but she ignored the pain. Rafa was conscious. Barely. She held his face. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. He coughed. Because... She kissed him before he could finish. For the first time, it wasn't gratitude or relief. It was human. Deep. Warm. Real. He didn't reply with words. He just gripped her hand tightly. And together, under a sky torn by fire, they waited for the silence to return. The world didn't end. Despite everything, the blast, the wounds, the impact still echoing in their bones and their memory, the world was still there. Covered in snow, yes, but alive. The morning sky was a golden gray, dripping between the clouds like the universe was still trying to be beautiful, even through exhaustion. And down below, among cracked rock and melted plates of alien metal, 2 survivors breathed. Kalira moved first. Her internal sensors had rebooted. The legs, damaged but functional, still responded. She'd woken before dawn, as always. But today, she wasn't testing movement or reprogramming motor functions. Today, she just watched. Sitting at the edge of the shelter, she watched the ice melt. Rafa was asleep inside, his body covered by a makeshift thermal blanket, his left arm immobilized by a brace built from alien armor plates. His face was bruised, and still, he breathed deeply, like someone lost in a dream. She stayed there a long time, watching him, not out of need, but out of choice. When he woke, it was with a hoarse groan. The left side of his body still burned, but his chest was intact. His lungs still worked. That was enough of a win. "Morning," he mumbled, eyes still closed. "You snore," Kalira replied from the corner, without turning. "Seriously? Like a tundra beast. Probably scares predators away." He laughed. His throat ached. "And you moved too quietly. Nearly gave me a heart attack, waking up to see you just standing there like a statue. I almost shot you. Liar. You can barely lift your arm." Details. They smiled. And in that smile, there was more intimacy than any touch could hold. Over the next few days, the makeshift station became a shelter. It wasn't much. No real structure. No steady warmth. But it had a salvaged solar generator from the destroyed Sentinel and walls of organic titanium, repurposed from the ship that tried to wipe them out. While Rafa healed, Kalira took on the daily tasks. She prepped thermal plates, organized supplies, and spent hours connected to what was left of the comm system. Not to send signals, but to watch. Because she knew where there was one verdict, another could follow. But something inside her had started to change. She no longer walked just out of necessity. She walked because she wanted to. Because she wanted to feel the ground under her feet. Because she wanted to be here. One afternoon, while calibrating a weather sensor, she heard a sound from inside the shelter. Something between a groan and a curse. She rushed to Rafa. He was trying to stand. On his own. "You're an idiot," she said, arms crossed. "I know, but a standing idiot is better than a hero in bed." She stepped closer, and for the first time, he let her help him sit up. "Is pride a species-wide thing with you? Your people discarded you for less, remember?" She went quiet, then nodded, somber. "Still, I think we started getting things wrong when we forgot what it meant to fall." On the 8th night, the world fell completely silent. No more alarms, no active radar, no sound but wind brushing against the rocks. And still, they were both awake. Kalira sat beside Rafa, wrapped in a thermal blanket, her purple hair falling over her shoulders like worn silk. She was holding something in her hands, a small energy core. "This still works," she said. Rafa looked. He recognized it. It was the secondary propulsion core from the Sentinel ship. Small, portable, a smart cell, enough to power an escape pod. "You could leave with that," he said. "Get off Earth, off their radar. And you?" "Me? I've got nowhere to go. No reason to." She was silent for a long time, then said, "I carried this for 4 days, trying to decide if I should leave it for you, or use it to escape alone. And why didn't you?" She met his eyes. No hesitation, no mask. "Because you're the only thing on this planet who never looked at me like I was a mistake." The next day, Rafa managed to walk to the cave entrance. Still limping, still in pain, but at her side. She reached out her hand. He took it, and together, without hurry, they looked out across the horizon. It was the same world. Frozen, cruel, vast, but they weren't the same. And as unlikely as it was, something deep inside told them this was only the beginning. The snow didn't fall like it used to. It was lighter now, more scattered, as if the world had grown tired of burying everything alive. And that morning, sharp, cold, and quiet, Kalira climbed the rocky ridge on the leg she once rejected and now accepted as part of herself. Rafa followed, slowly, his arm prosthetic still adjusting to the aches that came at night. But he smiled. He always smiled when he saw the way she walked now. Not like a machine, not like an exile, but like someone who finally belonged in her own skin. At the top, what remained of an old tree stood. Burned, yes, but not dead. One branch had survived, pushing out shy leaves toward the sky. Kalira sat beneath it. Rafa settled beside her. For a while, neither of them spoke. The wind filled the space between them, not as a threat, but as a witness. "If you'd asked me one cycle ago how I thought my story would end," she said, eyes on the horizon, "I would have said alone. In a lab, brain shut down, body stacked like useless data. And now," she took her time to answer, "now, I don't think there's an end. Just crossings." Rafa didn't look at her, but his hand found hers on the ground, held it tight. "You know," he said, "I was dead too, before you fell out of the sky." She turned to him. "Didn't seem like it. That's because I knew how to hide it. But I didn't feel anything. Not really. Dying inside doesn't hurt. It just empties you out. And now," he turned to face her. Now I feel everything. Too much, honestly. Especially when you look at me like that. She raised an eyebrow. Like what? Like I matter. Silence. Then Kalira leaned in. Gently. Like someone who knows something fragile is still healing. She touched her forehead to his. An old gesture in her culture. A sign of acceptance. You do matter. Even if my people never understand it. Even if yours don't either. He smiled. Then let them not understand. We'll live anyway. As the sun began to set, she pulled the energy core from her coat. It still pulsed. You think we should use it? She asked. Run. Start over on another planet. Another system. And just leave all this behind. Yes. Rafa didn't answer right away. Then he took the core, carefully, and hurled it into the frozen lake below. Her eyes widened. Rafa, if we ever want to leave, we'll build another. But running? No. He looked at her. This is home now. Kalira took a deep breath and smiled. A full smile. Free. Then let's rebuild. Even if it's with mismatched pieces. There's no fix more beautiful than that. They looked at each other once more, then kept walking, one step at a time, together. And as the golden sky exploded over the snow, it became clear. This wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something no one had ever dared to believe possible. The valley was green. It wasn't the frozen wasteland where Kalira nearly died, or the battleground where Rafa almost lost everything. Now it was green, real, alive. Greenhouses covered in translucent alloy sheltered hybrid crops. Patrol drones flew in silence. Children, human and alien, ran through stone paths as if this place had always existed. As if war, exile, and fear were just old stories. But they weren't. They lived on, hidden in the scars of the land. In every makeshift structure, in every metal prosthetic wrapped in living fiber. And in the wall where this was carved in 3 languages. Here, what was broken blooms? Rafa walked slowly, his left arm now replaced by an advanced model. The same one he designed for Kalira. He carried a basket of seeds and a quiet smile. His beard was fuller, his eyes less tired. Kalira waited at the entrance to the community school. She wore a lightweight suit, form-fitting, no armor. The prosthetic legs were now as much a part of her as bone. Her violet hair was tied up in a messy knot. As he got closer, she raised an eyebrow. You forgot the hybrid oxygen plant. Did I forget it? Or leave it just so I could hear you complain? Coward. But she smiled. He kissed her forehead, then took her hand. No rush, like always. At the highest point in the valley, there was a lookout. From there, they could see it all. The fields, the families, the solar towers, the silent reactor pulsing with clean energy. But the most important thing wasn't what was there. It was who was coming. Landing pods descended slowly, some from orbit, others guided by hidden satellites. They carried no flags, no banners, no promises of glory. They carried exiles, just like she once was. And Rafa knew this wasn't a coincidence. It was her name that now traveled through forgotten galaxies. It was their story, a broken human and a discarded alien, that inspired deserters, runaways, and shattered hearts to seek out this valley. In the central library of the shelter, there was a digital record. It wasn't a biography or a tribute, just a simple entry, and signed, a journal. And it read, she came from people who gave up on her. He came from a planet that had given up on itself. But together they walked, not by miracle, not by fate, but because sometimes love is born in the place where everything fails, and somehow still find a way to bloom. And if you've read this far, it means you believe it too, that even a broken body, even a wounded world, can begin again. If you've ever rooted for an impossible love, hit subscribe, because we're going to keep telling stories like this. Stories of loss, of courage, and of faith in the unlikely. Drop a comment below. Do you believe love can save someone who had already given up? Have you ever seen someone come back to life when no one else believed they could? We'll see you in the next story. Until then, keep believing in the impossible.